Hey guys, Grifter here with another VTOL VR tutorial, this time for the AH-94's GBU-39ER weapon system. A comment I often get whenever I interact with pilots or gunners for the AH-94 is they don't always know how to use this weapon system. And it does take a little bit of experimentation and trial and error to get right, so I thought I'd make this tutorial to streamline that process. So the first thing I want to say is that the GBU is not a missile like people believe. It is still a bomb. It's simply a bomb that glides, and it has a rocket booster on the end of it, which helps to shoot it off of our pylons, so that way it can gather enough height and glide to the target. So generally, for most people, they're going to default to the 145 or 114 on the AH-94, which is fairly common. But I'm gonna make the case for the GBU-39 in this video, because there's a couple of different things we can do with this weapon system that you can't really do with the 145 or the 114. So I'm gonna very quickly switch to my first-person view and explain some of the options of the GBU-39ER, and from there we'll talk about some methods for targeting for GPS, and also some things you can do with the GBU-39ER on the helicopter that you can't necessarily do on other aircraft. So I'm going to swap real quick. Okay, so you should be able to see what I can see right now. I'm going to go ahead and open up the equipment menu. I'm going to go to the GBU-39ER page, and I'm going to talk about all the two modes and options you have here. But I'm going to start with manual first, since that's where it's left by default. So what a manual target mode means is that if I can open up the GPS targets here, is if we have a series of targets on GPS designated, manual simply means to change between these targets, we have to use our next target or our previous target to swap between two different targets. It does not do it automatically. To do that, we actually have to switch to what is known as auto mode. And what that'll do is in auto mode, it'll fire at the first target and then sequentially move down the list of targets, firing the next bomb in order until eventually all your ordnance is expended, or it rotates through all the targets and then will re-rotate around again, eventually taking all your ordnance. So do be careful using auto. In relation to auto, we have the auto release rate, which determines how fast our bombs come out. 120 is the shortest, 240 is in the middle, and 480 is at the end. There's really not a lot of tactical necessity to changing this around. Mostly, I would say, for release rate, keep it to where you're comfortable. I keep mine at 240, so that way if I'm firing auto and I'm holding down my trigger, that'll give me a little extra time to let go of the trigger, so I don't shoot all my bombs off at once. Okay, so that's the various modes. Actually, one more mode I want to talk about, and that is the dumb bomb mode, which I'll show you the symbology once I'm in the air and looking at some targets, but this works just like any dumb bomb mode would for any plane in the game. It doesn't really require any explanation really beyond that. Once you see the symbology, it'll look very familiar if you're familiar with it. If not, I can point you in the direction of a good video that explains dumb bombs pretty well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a time skip from where I am here all the way over there, and I will be in the gunner seat ready to show you how to get some targets lined up. All right, welcome back. As you can see here, we're just in the front gunner seat, turning a few things on, and we're going to talk about how we can get some GPS coordinates for our GBU-39s. So, generally, the first reaction for most is to go here to the nav menu, using my left TDAC control SOI toggle. I'm going to go ahead and activate SOI, and just like you would use left to move around and right stick to zoom in and out, you can simply zoom in and out on your GPS targets. Now, an important thing to keep in mind is that while these targets are static, when you're aiming at them with a map like this, you can be prone to missing your target from time to time, because while it might seem a very small amount off here, that bit of offness can translate into feet, and feet translates into missing its target. So while we can still say hit GPS send and send that target to our GPS coordinates. I'm not going to do that because I don't like shooting GPS targets that are laid by map because of accuracy reasons. Now, something you can do if you do not have access to a radar or you do not have access to line of sight is you could create a bunch of groupings around this target and hope for the best, but at that point you're going to be wasting ammunition. So what I'm going to do instead, for my preferred way of hitting targets at a longer range, is I'm going to switch to the radar. I'm going to power this on, and there we go. So this radar functions quite similarly to our, I'm trying to think of air radar, anti-radiation radar. So we just simply hit SY on the button, or we can use our toggle button. In this case, we just simply select our targets like you would on the anti-radiation system, right? And there we go. You just simply click down on the joystick once you have your cursor over the target, and as you can see, we are now locked onto our target. So from here, something we can do is we can directly hit GPS send, and if we go to our GPS page, there we go. We have one coordinate as designated by radar. If this was a map, it would say map. For our TGP, it's going to say TGP, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But we now have a coordinate towards that radar position, which means we can fire our weapon. Well, I'm going to go back for 1 second, and I'm going to show you another feature of the radar. So, let's say we're using our radar. Now, I also want to talk about the radar really quick, too. So something about this radar, most people don't really fully understand, is that our radar receiver and our radar emitter are actually on the top, right above where our spinning blades are. I'm sorry, I'm turning around like this. And that means that the radar essentially is at the top of the aircraft. So as long as the radar is showing above any sort of this horizon line or these mountains here, if we were flying along, that radar can actively scan forward to be able to track targets. So as long as you're in sort of popping up and hovering over these mountains, you can actually use your radar to target things that you wouldn't normally be able to see. And by extension, destroy them with a GBU-39 as long as they are a static location and you have a GPS coordinate. So another thing we can do, right, is if we do have line of sight and we find a target with our radar and we want to start thinking, are there other targets around it, is we can hit our slave TADS button. And what that's going to do is if I switch over quickly to our TADS, which is not powered on right now, but I power it on, and I go back to our radar and hit the slave button, and then go back to TADS. This is what happens is that our radar locks our TADS towards the target for us. So that way, if we just go ahead and get SY control and zoom in, you'll see that we're zoomed in on our radar locked target, and we can also look for other targets. So that way, if we're just flying around and we don't have a good line of sight, because sometimes when you're high up, it's hard to see, this is a good way to search for groups of targets, especially SAM batteries. So that way, we just simply, to use the TADS, we just simply move it from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle. And to acquire a target with our TADS, we just hit the GPS send button, just like we would on the other one. We just go over to our GPS targets, and there it is. TGP and radar. So there's our first coordinate designated by our radar, and our second one designated by our TGP. And if we look for our symbology, you'll see that we have two different triangles down there. So very quickly, I'm going to arm my weapons because I want to spend a moment to talk about the symbology for the bombs. So this is what our dumb bomb symbology looks like. As you can see, that circle down there represents where the bomb will fall. This line shows the path. This segmented line shows the direction of our aircraft in relation to where we want our bomb to go. So we want to keep these two lines together for dropping. Our circle should be on our target, and as we approach our target, we're going to see a diamond fall on this segmented line until eventually it reaches these two arrows. When we see the target when the diamond drop between the two arrows, we release the weapon, and they will dumb fall to their targets. Again, not very accurate, but I thought I would explain the symbology for you. So I'm going to go ahead to equipment, and I'm going to switch to manual. So as you can see in manual, we have a much different targeting symbology when we're tracking for GPS. So instead of having the line with the circle, we now just have one big circle that represents our guidable range for our munition. And what that means is that as long as our diamond, which is our coordinate, it falls within this larger circle, we should be able to confidently hit our target. The inner circle represents a much greater sense of accuracy, so if we wanted to be more accurate, we could get it within this smaller circle. In my experience, I try to get it within the smaller circle as often as I can, but I don't really get too mad if I can't. If you have a large spread of targets, it's not uncommon to have some be inside the smaller circle and others to be outside of it. Use your best judgment when firing a salvo of these bombs. Speaking of firing a salvo, I want to show you something else. So something not a lot of people know about the AH-94 is that its pylons can actually move. So if I hold down left mod or left trigger on my left control and I move my thumbstick up and down, you can see that the diamond starts to move. And what's actually moving, if I can look outside really quickly, is if I move my pylons up and down, I can actually move the ordnance itself in this direction of attack. So, if I aim it higher, I can have more distance on my initial boost, and so I can hit a farther target, which is what I'm doing here, is I'm giving it extra altitude to fire. If I lower it, I'm losing my angle upwards, but I'm gaining time downwards in the fact that they will launch and go directly towards their target. So this is something where it's good to mess with if you're just where I am right now and you need to move your diamond within the circle, or you're just too close and you need to move your pylons down to be aimed at the target. And you can do this with any weapon on the AH-94, but it's especially important here on the GBU-39ER. So, something I'm going to show you very quickly is the outside view of the aircraft and the missile or the bomb while it's in flight. Alright, you should be able to see my aircraft now. I'm going to go ahead and fire a manual release GBU-39. So as you can see, the wings have split open, and the bomb is tracking towards the target. It could take quite a while for the GBU-39 to reach its destination. So don't use this weapon if you need to react quickly to something like a SAM site or an enemy vehicle that's shooting at you, because this weapon does take quite a long time to travel. However, as you can see while watching it, it doesn't produce a vapor trail, it doesn't produce exhaust, so it can be a very hard weapon to trace unless you have something advanced like the F-45. So in PvP, this weapon can be a large boon for very stealth attacks. And there we go, a shack. So, that was our GBU-39 firing in flight, and I'm going to go ahead and show you one more thing about that you can do with the GBU-39 that you can't normally do with most aircraft. And I'm going to go ahead and switch positions one more time to show you what I mean. Alright, welcome back. As you can see, I'm no longer in the same position, and I've actually moved. And as you can see, looking at my TADS display, GPS acquiring my target, we are not within line of sight of our target. However, that does not stop us from firing. One of the GBU-39ER's greatest strengths is that this weapon system does not have to have line of sight to be able to fire. You can fire it from well beyond line of sight, from over mountains, buildings, even behind some low-lying cover, to be able to destroy your target that is protected by cover or any sort of natural defense, such as a SAM site. So, as you can see, we don't have line of sight, but we still have our targets. So I'm going to switch to my auto mode, so that way I can fire all of my bombs at once at all of these targets in sequence. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different view real quick and show you what that looks like. Alright, since we're at the end of our mission, we'll go ahead and launch all of these at all 4 targets to put on a real fireworks display. First, I'm going to move my pylons up to make sure we're at maximum pylon range, and now I'm going to fire. As we can see, I don't even need line of sight to be able to deliver some major hurt to a large group of enemies. My glide bombs will simply glide to the target, showing no indication where I've shot from, who I'm shooting at, or where I am. There's nothing connecting this ordnance to me, as I'm just simply hovering, minding my own business while this is happening. So this can be a great PvP style weapon, given that it's much harder to track you while you're flying. So, this has been Grister, and I hope you've enjoyed this video on the GBU-39ER. As you can see, it's a weapon that gives you a lot of tactical possibilities inside the helicopter. So try it sometime, leave a comment and let me know what you think, and if this video helped you out, I'd really appreciate a like. But, until next time, this is Grister.